So inside of SCCM, we have our co-management enabled, and our co-management allows us to take workloads and move those workloads into Azure. And so you can see I've created a pilot collection. It's just a way to stage the rollouts for things like compliance data or endpoint protection or software updates. So we talk about managing software updates outside of the network and how to do that. If you have a config-man environment, it's a pretty easy transition to make into co-management, get the device registered with Azure AD, and tell SCCM and the client agent, hey, I want Intune to manage these devices or these pieces of the device moving forward. So let's take a look at what that looks like, and we'll log in with this. All right, so I'm going to try to make this bigger. All right, so one of the things that you'll note is that in this Windows 10 VM that I have a restart window from patches that were deployed last night. The patches were deployed, and I see the Software Center reboot piece of it. And so it's kind of telling, but I also have the company portal that I've installed on here, which is how you get your device MDM registered. And if you're familiar with SCCM, I'll show you what it looks like inside of SCCM to be co-managed. So the control panel of the SCCM client, notice you have co-management enabled, and your capabilities are an aggregate of the different configurations for co-management. So you can see I've got co-management enabled in some cases, and they're all compliant as they are, which basically means I'm going to move some of my workloads to Azure or to Intune. So if I do, let's take a look at how we know it's actually moved into Azure. So we go to Windows Update, and this probably looks very familiar. Some of your devices or some of your settings are managed by your organization. So you can view these policy settings, but what probably is at least a relatively new set of things to look at, let me see here if I can scroll this bar, there we go, is that notice MDM. So auto install and notify for restart is done through MDM. The active hours is managed through MDM. Set the active hours start is managed through MDM. And so it's a true co-management of the Windows Update. So whether this device is in my data center or it's at home or it's in some other city doing something, it's going to follow the updates that I have published to it from Intune. A couple other side notes on MDM if you're not familiar with it on a Windows platform. There's a couple of ways to, if you don't have the company portal, there's a couple of ways to troubleshoot. So if you go to the Managed Worker School account, and you notice here, you go to Info, you can sync to the MDM authority, and you can see the last time that it synced for me was this morning. And when you sync it, it's like, think of it as like pulling policy for SCCM if you're familiar with it. And then down here, you can create a diagnostic report and see all of the MDM settings that were flipped on the device. So this port just generated. So we can scroll through it, and you can see all of the settings that are either provisioned or not provisioned, or here's a great example, the updates that are managed. You can see the original value and then the configured value that we've published down to it. So this device is truly in a co-managed state to be able to patch across the internet when it used to patch from the SCCM environment, because this was just an SCCM client yesterday, and we enabled co-management, and now it can patch from really wherever it needs to. And the way that it does that, if we go to Intune, we're going to take a look at the update rings that we can manage in Intune. Let's go to the new portal just to try to get used to it. So we have Windows 10 update rings and we have feature updates. So if we take a look at the Windows 10 fast ring that I set up for this configuration, we can take a look at 50% have succeeded. We can look at device status. Notice my Windows 10 on-prem succeeded. It pulled policy just a few minutes ago, but that's what prompted my restart for my software updates through the Admin Center or through Software Center. And notice that we can set up channels like fast or slow. Do we want to include drivers? How many days do we allow for a deferral period? What is the automatic install behavior? And this is kind of a funny one. So I set this up last night to be staged, and then I had forgotten that I had allowed the install to happen without a prompt. And so auto install maintenance time, and my maintenance time ended at 6 p.m. So I came in this morning to get set up for the demo, and it was ready to restart. I'm like, what? And it's because I pushed out my policy, which I found amusing. But the option to do things like pause updates or check for Windows updates, they're all here from a configuration settings. And knowing that it's an Intune service, meaning it doesn't need SCCM any longer to do the updates once it's been configured for, you're now looking at Intune for your updates, it will check against the Intune policy and then manage that on its own. And internally, I believe it's managing the Windows Update for Business keys on the actual device itself. So you don't have all of the granularity that you might have or be used to in SCCM, but that's okay because a couple reasons. One, we want to try to get away from having that level of granularity and make it into bigger groups of people for updates. We want to make it so that they're compliant with our update policy. So allowing as few exceptions as possible will ensure a more secure patching or patch management for it. So again, it might be a little bit of a change of policy or configurations or mindsets, but it does allow for quite a few robust features. And again, you can create multiple policies and assign them to multiple groups, so you can still configure them that way. When you talk about feature updates, like to 1909, for example, you create a profile and you deploy the profile. There's not a lot to the actual feature update to deploy it, but if you needed to get it out and you've done your testing and due diligence through applications and ensured that the user group that you're sending this out to will not be negatively impacted by going to 1909, then you can deploy these updates through something like Intune for your workers that are remote. So again, taking your traditional on-prem workloads, moving them, some of them, not necessarily all of them, into Intune allows you to do things like deploy your operating system upgrade to 1909, or deploy your Windows updates to these devices that are no longer touching your network. You couple that with some feature-rich reporting and analytics and dashboards, then all of a sudden you have all of the clarity and search capabilities and auditing pieces or at least inventory information pieces that you need kind of right at your fingertips.